we really just had to embrace it. There was no if, buts or maybes. It was essentially either make it work or shut it down. After only being open for 7 months or whatever it was, 8 months, there wasn't really a choice there.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Location, as they say, is everything. It can have an impact on the success and the perception of a restaurant, but it can also create challenges in a pandemic. When we speak of restaurants, we often refer to them as either being in the city and suburbs or regional restaurants. But there are many that sit on the periphery of our major hubs, that are both or neither. Matt Binney is the chef and owner of Heartswood in Yarra Glen, Victoria. Matt, you thought you were on the outside of the zone with the second lockdown in Victoria, but it turns out you've just scraped in and you've had to close down. What's that been like?
Hey, Huck. It's been quite challenging, to be honest. We, whenever you have anything delivered out here, you always collect those regional surcharges. We were hopefully optimistic, I guess, about being just far enough out that we could avoid the shutdown. But we are in a fairly large shire as part of Yarra Ranges, so unfortunately we didn't quite get outside that.
What's been some of the challenges of this period? This is the second lockdown, but you are in a regional area compared to your colleagues in the CBD. What's been some of the challenges in this period?
Well, I guess the Yarra Valley especially is a massive tourist area, and so we're quite reliant on that to make a venue viable, make it work. Weekends when there are people out here are huge. So you're really sort of driving that. I guess this second lockdown has sort of really highlighted how reliant we are on the local community and really developing the product that we have. And I think we've been very fortunate with the amount of support that we've received. Everyone out here is so community focused. They really get behind you when you've got a good product. They're very passionate about their local industry and their local area, and when you've earned their trust, when you've spent a little bit of time here. I mean, we're only still relatively new. They really do get behind you, and it does help when you being a relatively small town, when you start to learn all their names, all their faces, their coffee orders, their preferences, and all that sort of stuff. So engagement's been a massive part of us being successful. I think as far as challenges are concerned, I mean, you just don't have the sort of the foot traffic that you have in town, or what we call in town. People out here, you are, because we are sort of 15 to 20 minutes from sort of larger built up areas. This second lockdown highlights how important it is to really give the locals what they want. Hence why we've when all this sort of kicked off, we decided that we would change our menu, our offering every week, new theme. So we put out a poll early in the week, give people a choice between two cuisines. I've cooked in a number of restaurants over the years. So we do a menu inspired by a different country every week, and we sort of really gave people the option as to what they wanted. So we've done versions of Thai and Mexican, Indian, obviously French, Italian. This week's Israeli. So we've really mixed it up, and it's also given people the opportunity to try some new stuff. There was a lot of trust building at the start. We obviously had to offer burgers and things like that as well from the daytime sort of takeaway menu just to appease a few. But now that we've sort of garnered that trust, we're probably doing, between 20 and 30 pickups on a Friday, and the same again on a Saturday. So yeah, it's been a lot of work to get us there, but that's something that we now look as we look towards the future. That's something that may hang around for quite a long time. I feel like at this point there'd be a hell of a lot of backlash if we went back to the more refined style of dining, especially at night time, that we were doing.
What's the response been like to this model that you created in the first lockdown and you've brought it back again? Is the response different?
Yeah, I think. This time around, there's been not so much apprehension to the model, but there's been apprehension to the situation down here. I think everyone was starting to recognise that we were getting a little bit closer to the end, the potential end of JobKeeper. I think in this second lockdown, there has been a few more people out our way that have lost their jobs or been stood down. There's a massive tradie community out here. So I think through the first lockdown, coming into the end of the financial year, there was a lot of projects that have already been greenlit. So I think that that was holding everybody over. But I think this time, with the rate of infection, with the how quickly this moved on everybody, I think there was definitely a drop in confidence. Even out here where we're a little bit more insulated, we're a little bit more sheltered from the volatility of town. So, that I think now with the latest announcements, we'll hopefully bounce back a little bit to our first lockdown levels. They were pretty sustainable. We were sort of back to operating at about 40 or 50% most weeks, which for us, that's 40 or 50% of average turnover, which for us, it worked. It was working. It was a model that we could sustain. It meant having to shift into I'm on the floor all 5 days and then I'm in the kitchen for the 2 nights of takeaway. We've got basically no casual hours at the moment, unfortunately. Just a few picking and packing and things like that on the evenings, during those peak service times. And then just carrying, one in the kitchen, one full-timer in the kitchen and, supporting them through this. So, they've put in a huge amount of work, to sort of back us and support us. So, it's definitely like a little family out here. It's definitely been an interesting sort of period for us.
What's it like being a restaurant just in a normal trading period, not in the pandemic, that's not quite a regional restaurant, close enough to the sea to get day trippers, but you kind of are regional? What's some of the challenges involved in that?
Well, you're not quite regional. So, but I guess for us, the Yarra is it's almost a bit of an anomaly that you do get those, those day trippers. There's a lot of traffic out here. Even during the week, there's a lot of tours. There's a lot of that sort of stuff. Where our model doesn't try and compete with the winery restaurants, and a lot of the other attractions. Where we're complementary to a lot of that. Our daytime offering is sort of just a sort of a really solid cafe offering. It's not so much my background, but when we looked at opening this venue, we really wanted to make sure that at the end of the day, it's a business. We need to keep the doors open. So we sort of really had to engage the locals. We had a solid look at what was out here and what we could do to complement that. So we've been very fortunate with the site that we had come up. We weren't actually initially looking at coming out all the way out to Yarra Glen. We live in the outer suburbs anyway, so we're sort of looking a little closer to us. So not quite, still sort of outer suburbs, not quite as far out, but we had a really solid site come up. It's an old bank, so it's over 100 years old, and it's a really cool spot. It can be quite challenging. It can be quite challenging to manage everything else that's going on. We've been pretty flexible with how we've gone. I mean, the vibe out here, I guess, as well, is that there's a huge amount of B&Bs. There's a huge amount of other places to stay. So we really wanted to make sure that we were going to be able to service those other attractions and other things like that. So we just had to sort of find our niche pretty quickly as well. Because we had at the start of the year as well, we weren't fire affected, fortunately enough, this time around. But there's still after the last super severe fires, that we still have a bit of that association. So once the fires do start up or anything like that does start to happen, there's a bit of smoke around, things like that. People get pretty apprehensive. Travelling out to the valley, even though we're only an hour from Melbourne. That definitely plays a massive part. So, we're already trading a little bit softer than we were anticipating leading into the start of this year, and things were building reasonably well. But yeah, I mean, it's as soon as there's any sort of volatility, people do start to can the day trips pretty quickly. And then, I mean, as well as that, you've got all the other standard stuff of being out of town, deliveries, that sort of fell away once the pandemic started a little bit. We were trying to do the right thing by our suppliers and, make sure we pay down all our outstanding invoices as quickly as possible and things like that to, make sure we don't have any outstandings sitting out there. So, we were doing a lot of runs into town to pick up stock and things like that to take the pressure off everybody. But, that's sort of something that, we are fortunate enough that we're close enough that we can do that. I mean, if we're much further out, it would have definitely made life a lot more challenging, that's for sure.
How are you feeling at the moment with what's going on in Melbourne and your reliance on the customers from Melbourne moving forward? What's your thoughts?
It's, to be honest, the feeling that I'm getting from a lot of the customers that we do still have, and they're talking to a lot of other friends in town and things like that. We're sort of trying to band together, and you're checking in all the time and seeing how everyone's going and what their plans are and how they're sort of combating any of the volatility around. There's definitely a sense that, or definitely a feeling that people kind of want a decision, a fairly definitive decision made. It feels a little like we're going to go in circles for a while, and I think that's been the hardest part. Is that for us, my feeling on it is that with a little bit more, I mean there's no roadmap for any of this. So with a little bit more notice, I think everybody would have been able to plan into a lockdown a bit better. Nobody would have been carrying as much stock. People wouldn't have outlaid. I mean, I've taken to running it, and it hamstrings us at times that we don't order until the night before we reopen. We carry no stock through the weekend. We're running at an absolute skeleton just in case they do decide on a Wednesday that things are changing, or because we're closed from Monday to Wednesday. If you get an announcement on a Monday or whatever that as of Wednesday night you're not going to be able to operate anymore, we can't afford to carry a couple of $1,000s worth of stock. Or be organising, getting that far out in advance and organising menus weeks in advance. Hence why the model that we're currently running with the changing themes and the differing menus every week is kind of worked in our favour. It lets us run extremely tight. And we do just sell out. We prepare enough food for what we think we're going to do, and the average amount of customers that we've been getting over the last couple of weeks, and we essentially just say, guys, make sure you get in early. Make sure you pre-order. Make sure you're settled and you're organised, because otherwise you're going to miss out. And there's been, I think that's probably what's held us in pretty good stead as well, going the way we've been going is that, you know, people now recognise that, you know, as soon as the menu goes up on social media on a Friday morning, you know, if the menu goes up at 10 a.m. and I'm getting phone calls and emails at 10:05 with people placing their order for Friday and Saturday nights, because, you know, otherwise they're going to miss out. You know, so there's been that bit of FOMO out here for a lot of our regulars, and they've got their favourite cuisines, so they ask when they're coming back, and we sort of rotate through those pretty well. You know, so you've got I think we've got about 8 or 9 different cuisines that we kind of rotate through, and then you sort of start playing the most popular ones off against each other, and really get everybody engaged and involved, and it's really lovely to see. And then, you know, as we came out of that first lockdown, you know, people were ordering for groups. It was getting a little it's getting a little out of control for the kitchen. Like we're having people ordering for, you know, the maximum number of people they could have at their house, and all of a sudden you've got, you know, $400 and $500 takeaway orders, and
wow,
you know, things are getting real. So
more of those, please.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, we were doing batch cocktails, you know, and a bit of takeaway booze and things like that. So we've, you know, we're very fortunate in our licensing here as well. So, you know, we sort of made that sort of shift pretty quick, and just embraced it, to be honest. But I guess the second time around now, the hardest part, I think, you know, being a chef but being on the floor and being an owner and, you know, being in a smaller town, is you have the same conversation 20 times a day now. It's, you know, what are you doing? How's it going? How are you feeling? And, you know, it's really nice that everyone's sort of, you know, reaching out and, you know, asking how you're going when they come in to get their coffee. But I'm not going to lie, the unwavering positivity is starting to wear a bit thin, you know, because nobody wants to come in and get a coffee and, you know, be chatting to a sad sack in the morning, you know. So that's probably at the moment, you know, just trying to stay positive in the face of, you know, continuing uncertainty, is probably the thing that's starting to wear on me. You know, in the kitchen you can kind of hide from it. You know, as I think as chefs sometimes we don't appreciate the amount of work and putting on a happy face and, you know, essentially faking it till you make it that the front of house have to do. So it's that's certainly been an enlightening experience, shall we say.
How does a young kid that did his apprenticeship on the Gold Coast end up owning a restaurant in the Yarra?
When I was living on the coast, I you know, there was a bit going on in Brizzy, but outside of that, there wasn't a huge amount going on. And you know, I finished my apprenticeship pretty early. I did a school-based apprenticeship and finished high school and all that sort of jazz. And then decided I'd go to ski seasons, and, you know, because working your guts off, being an apprentice, you miss out on, you know, your late teens, early 20s if you're not careful. So I decided that I was going to toddle off and, you know, did the usual, met a girl, moved to Melbourne where there was a bit more going on. And the first place I actually worked down here was out in the Yarra Valley at a winery restaurant. So, you know, there was that affinity with working out of town, and I really enjoyed sort of living outside of Melbourne City. And, you know, I wasn't much of a party animal or anything like that. And you know, looked after I moved from the valley. I was very fortunate enough to get a job in the inner suburbs with Rob and Bronwyn Cabord at Merricote, and that sort of really that was game changing for me. That really highlighted what I wanted out of my career, and as a restaurateur, like I couldn't think of better people, better operators than those guys. You know, that dining room, you know, bronze level of service is, you know, I think something that anybody can aspire to. And, you know, running the two-man crew in this dog box of a bloody kitchen at Merricote and Northcote, you know, with Rob, you know, I think I lost about 15 kilos when I started there, and, you know, just pushing on like an animal. And Rob doesn't mind a few textures and a few techniques either. So it was a very, very steep learning curve. I think I was in the weeds for the first sort of 5 months before I started to find my feet. So and then from there we pushed on, and Rob went to Key, and I got the opportunity to run Merricote and work one-on-one with Bron a lot, and learn a huge amount. And then from there we sort of we were looking at opening something else, and the market was a little volatile, and rents in the city were just unmanageably high, and so I kind of sat on it for a bit, and then I sort of decided that we were going to look at starting a family and all the rest of it. So we started looking for a site, and we're looking in sort of the outer suburbs of Melbourne, sort of 35, 40 minutes out where we live, and there's nothing sort of that's particularly refined in the area that we're in. So we're looking at that, and we're just fortunate that a place I was consulting for, the owners live out in the valley, and let me know that that this site was up and available, that we're in now in Yarra Glen, and we moved from there, and there was a little bit of sweet talking, a little bit of the face-to-face that we got. Like we probably didn't really have enough money to open a restaurant, and it was our first go around the track, and it's we wasted plenty of money on stuff that we thought was important at the start, as you do as a first-time restaurateur, and we've got a hugely important support network. People around us that are very good at being extremely blunt, telling us what's working, what's not, and just sort of helping us to hold ourselves accountable. So we were pretty lucky, and Rob and Bron were a big part of that as well. Great sounding board. Bron wrote the opening list, the wine list, and and still gives me a push on that when I need it. And I still talk to Rob about how I'm going and how I'm feeling about it. And he came and did opening weekend, and so it was a bit of a community project to get it open. Realistically, we just called on a huge amount of our friends that all have different skill sets, and builders and plumbers and sparkies and architects and all the rest of it. So it was a very humbling experience to know that we had that many people around us, and we had a baby 5 weeks before we opened, which was a great idea as well. So it's
Wow.
it's been an interesting first 12 months, that's for sure.
You've been cooking all sorts of cuisines during the pandemic. You've been forced to try a new model to survive. But can you tell us a bit about Heartswood and what you actually pre-pandemic were offering the market? So
Heartswood, as its initial concept, was sort of an upmarket cafe, I guess, during the day. There's plenty of other little cafes and things like that around, but nothing to the level that we were sort of looking to do. We thought, we need to have the best coffee in town. We need to do a really solid food offering, something that sort of highlights a bit of local produce, without getting too hung up. Bron wrote a list that really championed the sort of new wave or next gen sort of producer, or some of the guys and girls that are sort of out on their own, and that was the focus. It was us out on our own doing our own thing, trying to support people that were essentially doing the same. So that was our sort of daytime, our core daytime sort of stuff. And then we decided we'd do just 2 nights a week, Fridays and Saturdays, to cater for that crowd out here that was, the foodies visiting the valley, people coming out for anniversaries or weekends or weddings and whatever else. So, we would turn we essentially turned the volume up on that. Obviously my background's a little bit more in refined dining. So, me slinging eggs, whilst, at the end of the day, like, you've just got to pay the bills. And that's something that we sort of really, identified at the start that, that would be the part of the business that really carried us, and enabled me to cook the food that I wanted to cook at night. So, when we got to the nighttime stuff, the cloth napkins and full wine service and all that sort of jazz sort of started to kick in, and it was definitely cooking for people out of town rather than embracing the locals at night. Me cooking a bit more for me, and sort of really starting to sort of challenge people with some of the food we were doing. We're doing a like a smoked deal lasagna and things like that, just to something that I'd sort of worked on a little bit leading into it. Yeah, it's all the best parts of a of a standard lasagna, but nice little twist, and lovely and smoky, and still a little bit of smoked bacon and things like that in there, and a bit of kohlrabi instead of pasta, and so got people sort of thinking about what they were eating, and things just oxtail donuts. Who would have thought? Braised down oxtail, delicious on its own, then shove it inside some brioche and deep fry it. That was one of those ones where it was like, oh yeah, cool, this is a pretty solid idea. So started going through a fair few of those pretty quickly. I think that as a model was holding us in pretty good stead, and people were starting to find out about us, and we didn't obviously doing it on our own. Essentially, we there's no marketing budget, there's no paying PR, there's none of that sort of stuff. There's a few emails at the start, and we got a little bit of traction with a couple of the reviewers and things like that, which was really lovely, and a couple of little write-ups and bits and pieces and mentions. But essentially it was a lot of word of mouth and a lot of a bit of social media here and there. But I mean, I'm rubbish with social media as it is, so being in the kitchen all the time, I just don't allocate the time for that. So that's been another little learning curve over the last couple of months. But I think then having to make that switch to go more casual, we tried the first week of lockdown doing takeaway as Heartswood food as we would like to, and we did get a few people come and sort of embrace that, but it was already the people who would come and dine with us on a semi-regular basis anyway. So we realised pretty quickly after about the 10th phone call asking if we had the daytime buttermilk fried chicken burger on the nighttime menu that we were probably going to need to make a shift. So that was a pretty interesting sort of week where we had to redefine what we were, and really just had to embrace it. There was no if, buts, or maybes. It was essentially either make it work or shut it down. And after only being open for 7 months or whatever it was, 8 months, there wasn't really a choice there.
In the first year of owning your first restaurant, you had your first child and a pandemic. What's the impact been on you personally?
It's been challenging. I mean, from a personal standpoint, I don't get hung up on a lot. I try not to get to dwell on things and let things get to me. I'm pretty good at not taking work home with me. And I also made a really conscious decision, being our first restaurant as well, that I wasn't going to necessarily get too emotionally invested in the business, or as much as you can as a first time business owner, which is pretty hard and sounds pretty cold, but at the end of the day, the failure rate of restaurants, if you're not switched on, is pretty bloody high. So that was sort of that realistic approach, I think certainly helped. To be honest, having the baby as a distraction at times. You go home on the weekend, and if you had a quiet week, or something, you weren't quite happy with something, or there's a bill came in that you weren't expecting, or things like that. Just the little things that you think you've planned for as a first time restaurateur, and all of a sudden it creeps up and bites you in the ass. Having her at home and my partner at home, it just provided a lot of perspective, to be honest. And also gave me something, apart from just trying to keep the restaurant open, something to push for. We could have, realistically, there's plenty of people out there that could have looked at this pandemic and just thought, no, this is a good time to get out. It's just all a bit too hard, and that was certainly, we definitely looked at the numbers, at what we would need to do to make it all work, and that was a pretty sobering kind of moment where we looked at where we're at. We looked at the way the business was building, because we were building pretty solidly from sort of, I guess, from Australia Day long weekend through till they cancelled the Grand Prix. So we were feeling really solid at that point. As soon as they cancelled the Grand Prix, that was it. That was that cut our legs out from under us pretty quickly. And obviously, then from there everyone makes the shift. But that, I guess from my perspective on that, it was just you remove the element of choice, and you just have to get on with it. If you start dwelling on it, you wind up a couple of weeks behind, and all of a sudden, you're further in the hole than you thought you were, and you'll come unstuck pretty quickly. But in saying that as well, we've got a pretty solid support network of chef friends and things like that, and so I was getting a lot of text messages, asking how we were going and how the business was and how we were feeling about it. So it was nice that everyone sort of were really checking in on how we were doing, and it sort of made me a little bit more, even more determined to make sure we see the other side of this.
You've had to change your offering to survive during the pandemic. Do you think it'll change what you do moving forward with the restaurant?
I think it will. To be honest, I can't see us going back to where we were anytime soon. I think to be honest, I think there'd be a bit too much backlash. It's been that thoroughly embraced by the local community, especially, that it would be a really hard justification to just go back to what we were doing. We're very fortunate. We've got a very interesting building. It's 2 stories. There's a front footpath trading area that's quite large. There's 3 separate dining rooms downstairs. So we seat about 38 downstairs inside. At the moment, that's, when we were having dine-in again, because of the shape and size of the rooms, it actually only shook out to 16. So that was a challenge in itself. But with the upstairs area as well, we've, whether we run functions and things like that in the future, it's something that we, had looked at, but hadn't been in the position to sort of move on just yet. But the conversation has definitely been there that, we may look at doing the more refined dining again, but just offering it upstairs and making that almost like a separate entity to the rest of it, and extremely limited numbers, 10 or 12 seats, set menu only, and sort of give me the opportunity to play and cook the food that I would really like to be cooking again. But I definitely think that the model that we've shifted to is probably here to stay, realistically. It just doesn't make financial sense to go backwards. I think increasing the offering, and diversifying is what's going to make sure that we have a viable business, even if things do stay quite volatile for quite a long time. So that's definitely a positive that we've taken from it. It's really being where we are. The pub closed down and did a big refurb and things like that for their that first lockdown. So we essentially had a very captive audience out here. So it definitely enabled us to put our food in front of people who who probably thought we were a little bit too fancy at the start too. That we hadn't garnered their trust yet. We hadn't sort of had the opportunity to sort of really be embraced by them. And I think that at this point, those guests that we now have, we know their names, we know their kids, we know what they've been up to, we know where they're working, and how they've been getting along through this whole thing. So I think it's sort of ingrained us to the community a lot. So I think at this point we would be remiss to just give that all away for the sake of getting back to what we were doing. And essentially for the sake of, for ego, realistically. So, yeah.
There's no doubt that the impact on the industry is pretty brutal, and particularly the Victorian one. But what do you see moving forward? Are the positives coming out of this for the industry and for yourself?
I would like to think that, everybody will have sort of reassessed their business. They'll have looked at where they are and where they were and where they want to be. I'd like to think that it will enable a lot of businesses to sort of, keep a bit more liquidity in their business. I mean, margins are tight, like everybody talks about. But I think the sitting on terms for 30, 60, whatever, however long you've got on terms, I just don't see that as being a viable option long term. I mean, you can wind up in such a bad position so quickly, with a downturn like this. And I think that sort of thing, it's a false economy, really. You've got, it just makes everything so much more volatile. So I think, if people can, reassess their business model and sort of embrace the either COD if they can, or extremely limited terms. So we're on 7 days with pretty much all our suppliers. And even if we're not, we sort of move through our invoices. Within sort of that sort of 7 day period, regardless. And I think it gives you a better snapshot of your business. For us anyway, as first time operators, it's something that we've definitely learned over the last sort of 4 or 5 months. Is that it is really important to sort of look at the week to week and sort of plan out how you might increase the turnover, or whether it's worth increasing our turn or our production against having to put the extra staff member or two on, or trying to stand people back up. So I think that's going to be an interesting one moving forward. And I think the dining public, especially out here, where I'm pretty transparent with how our business is going. I'm not scared of sharing numbers with the customers that we have. They're pretty important to seeing, obviously pretty important to seeing us succeed long term. And I guess being open and honest with our position, because you do get people come out here and they see that we're busy on the weekend and they can't get a table and whatever else, and so we must be making a bloody fortune. And I think that a lot of people pre-COVID just didn't realise exactly how much work goes into it for restaurants and how expensive it is. And we were saying to them, coming out of that first lockdown, they're like, oh, you're really excited to get people dining in again. And I'm like, well, to be honest, takeaway's been doing pretty well. We're actually not that excited. The prospects of how quickly we could start losing money if we're not careful is, especially with a lot of venues opening back up and, people that didn't see the takeaway model as a viable option for them. I think us sort of being open and honest about where we're at as a business and what it actually costs us to operate, the week to week. People just don't realise didn't realise a lot of the time exactly how much money it costs to open the doors, or how much money it costs to close the doors. If you don't trade, if you don't have any sort of offset. So I think that's definitely a positive for us coming out of this, is that people are really engaged with our business, and they're really invested in seeing us succeed. It's a small town. There's not, there's a few other cafes and stuff. There's not a lot of options, and at the end of the day, Yarra Glen's kind of competing with Healesville, which is absolutely hammering on the weekend. So I think they're pretty happy that they've got their own little slice of something that's that's worth going to, and that they can really embrace, and that they can say, suck a fat one, Healesville, we've got this, you don't. So I think that's been really nice. It's not, we're never trying to compete with another bloody town, but I feel like that people have really gotten on board with that, and they're definitely making sure that we're going to be here to stay. So,
well, Matt, you've had a hell of a first year as a restaurateur, but you certainly sound like you're on top of everything. Really appreciated the chat today. Please keep in touch and let us know how things go moving forward, especially with Victoria, with the fact that the cases are still spiking, and it's a real challenge. But love chatting today. Keep in touch.
Yeah, thanks so much, mate. Thank you for having me. It's been much appreciated, and we really appreciate you guys putting in so much work to bring this podcast to everybody. It's been really inspiring and really enlightening to hear other people talk about their stories as well.
Awesome, mate. Talk soon. This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Stay tuned as we share the stories of Australia's hospo community, suppliers and producers in search of hope during this pandemic. Special thanks to executive producer Rob Locke for making this all happen. Follow us on Instagram at Deep in the Weeds Podcast, or email us at podcast@deepintheweeds.com.au. Stay safe and be well.